So a few months ago, I started watching custom keyboard content creators. I thought it was quite interesting. After a few months of research, I finally decided to build myself my first ever custom keyboard. I ordered all the parts and waited for about 2 weeks for them to get here. This is how I built my first ever custom keyboard. To start off, we have the kit. This is the GK61X. It is a hot swap RGB keyboard with a plastic case. The plastic is pretty good in terms of build quality, but the case is a bit hollow. Overall, I think it is a great budget keyboard and I recommend it for budget builds. Next, we have the switches. For the switches, I went with Gateron Yellows for this build for obvious reasons. The Gateron Yellows are pretty much the king of budget linear switches. Since I'm an impatient and I've been waiting to do this for months now, I will be building the keyboard with the stock switches. When the lube arrives in a few days, I will be lubing the switches. So a few minutes for you. Oh, and I forgot to mention, a good few of the pins were bent, so at this point I was really hoping I had enough switches for the full keyboard. Lucky for me, I did, and with 4 left over. For the keycaps, I went with the Acro Neon ASA profile keycaps. They go really well with my setup, and overall I just really like the look of them. Also, it came with a bunch of different options for an escape key. One of them looked like a fish, which is the one I will be using in this build. I mean, just look at this. You can't tell me that's not epic. Before I lube the switches, I will be foam modding the keyboard. How foam modding works is, well, you put a piece of foam inside the case. What this does is give the keyboard a softer feel, making the keyboard sound and feel nicer. Next, we screw the plate back in. Before I lubed the switches, I lubed the springs. My method for lubing the springs was bag lubing. Bag lubing is pretty much just putting all your springs in a bag, putting lube in that same bag, and shaking it to ensure equal lube on all springs. Once done, I started lubing the switches. This is my first time lubing switches, so I watched a tutorial on how to lube switches. That'll be in the description. I used Crytalk 205 grade 0 to lube my switches and stabilizers. So now that all the switches were done, I had to lube the stabilizers. I didn't record this because it was going to be too hard, so here's me putting the keycaps back on. Wow, this turned out a lot better than I expected. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye!